Hello, and welcome to the Metta Hour podcast with Sharon Salzberg. I'm Lily Cushman. I produce this podcast. And today we're coming to you with another episode of our anxiety series, a new series where Sharon is speaking to mental health experts, providers, different researchers, and spiritual teachers, all to garner tools to work with anxiety in these increasingly challenging times. So for episode 261, we have Jenny Taitz joining the series. Dr. Jenny is a clinical psychologist and assistant clinical professor in psychiatry at the University of California in LA. She's got a private practice there and is the author of several books, How to Be Single and Happy, as well as End Emotional Eating. Her latest book is Stress Resets, How to Soothe Your Body and Mind in Minutes. And she was actually on the podcast about a year ago talking about that book when it first came out. Today, we do a much deeper dive into the practices that she's offering in that book, which are really powerful, science-backed methods for working specifically with anxiety. The episode begins with Jenny's approach to anxiety and the superpower of emotional regulation, the power of cultivating a balanced inner life. And then Jenny goes on to break down several different practices for working with anxiety, including 3-point check-in, how to break up with overthinking, cognitive diffusion, working with your inner critic, sitting with uncertainty, building a hope kit, box breathing, loving kindness, and many more. Sharon closes out the episode with some hypothetical situations about anxiety that Jenny advises on. So this episode is really all about tools in a very practical way. Get your notebook out. And it's just a real treat to have Jenny back sharing her wisdom with us. So let's dive in. Episode 261, our anxiety podcast series with Jenny Taitz and Sharon Salzberg.
Hi, Jenny. Thank you so much for being here. I especially wanted to be able to speak to you as we're doing this new series on mental health and particularly anxiety. And I thought maybe a place we could start is if you have a working definition you use for anxiety. I know you're so practical in the ways that you approach mental health.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. I'm really grateful and honored to be here. This is my first podcast that I'm doing for the third time, so it's especially joyful and exciting. And in terms of a definition for anxiety, I think we really need to appreciate that anxiety is a normal response to stress, and it can actually be empowering. And so I don't think any of us would do things like go to the dentist or be punctual. Many of us wouldn't if we didn't have some amount of energy or concern about what would happen in the future if we weren't gearing up to face things. But for a lot of people, anxiety goes from being empowering to counterproductive. And so what we want to do is kind of be able to differentiate when kind of the thinking and the worrying about something in advance is useful versus hindering and kind of counterproductive.
And can you speak a little bit about your approach to working with anxiety in your private practice, working with clients? You're board certified in cognitive behavioral therapy, a diplomate in the Academy of Cognitive Therapy, and among the first psychologists to merit Linehan board certification in DBT.
Yeah, so when working with clients who are worrying or anxious, I like to combine a mindfulness-based approach with behavioral therapy. And so we need to all kind of learn to be able to get our minds into the present moment, which is why I'm such a fan of your work. We need to learn how to break free of overthinking and endless worrying. And so learning to be more present. And we also need to learn to face the things that might feel stressful. And so kind of combining watching our thoughts and being more courageous in our behaviors in kind of a structured way. A lot of people maybe try to do the hard things, but without the right mental framework or without doing it wholeheartedly. And so kind of teaching people to really change their lives to ultimately change their minds. And so, if someone's, let's say, nervous about a difficult conversation, it's kind of being able to be present in the conversation rather than worrying ahead of time or throughout, and then actually saying it all the way rather than kind of starting and apologizing and changing the topic. And so I find the combination of mindfulness plus behavioral tools to be really life-changing for many people. And this has been life-changing for myself as well.
There seems to be such a context of cultural anxiety around us nearly all the time these days. And how do you feel it affects us when the collective energy seems to have a baseline of shared anxiety?
Oh my goodness. I mean, emotions are contagious. And so it's certainly understandable if people around you are stressed or if the general tone in your community is tense. I even hear, like, when I'm waiting online in the coffee shop, that people are kind of casually talking about how difficult this time is. And so I think we certainly can feel affected by our environment and other people's level of anxiety. It kind of reminds me of when I was in graduate school. I had a friend who would always be super anxious before exams, and even just riding the train with her. We went to graduate school in the Bronx, and riding the train, for 45 minutes with her, I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. And so learning ways to kind of be able to center yourself, even if there is so much around you that's rumbling and contagious. And so, even with my friend, being able to say, I before exams, I love to listen to relaxing music. We should listen to music instead of talk about what might be surprising and difficult in ways we might not expect. And so I think knowing that we're not alone is incredibly helpful, and appreciating that you're not alone is really comforting. And that's, I think, a huge part of what you talk about and what your work really celebrates. But this mix of knowing that we're not alone, but also being able to turn towards finding some sort of centeredness if things around us are kind of cacophonous.
It's funny when I hear you say you went to graduate school in the Bronx, because I suddenly remembered, yeah, you're a New Yorker in a way, that's where we met. That's where we became friends, and where you were practicing meditation, as I was teaching. And so I have to sort of make a mental flip, like, oh, she lives in LA, right? She's from LA, actually.
Yeah. We actually met in Hawaii, which is.
Do we meet in Hawaii first? Okay.
We met in Hawaii, and then I really got to know you better in New York. So you're right about that. But yeah, and I think there is something about just even in New York, there's a certain level of energy, but we need to know how to channel it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's talk about emotional regulation. This is one of the first steps you talk about in your book. And can you explain what it is and why you begin there?
Emotion regulation is the ability to be able to feel like you have some ability to change your emotions. And so some people feel like their emotions are almost on an on-off switch, where either they're on or they're off. But emotions, we can actually put them more on a dimmer system where we can dial them down and up. And it's helpful to know this, because some people feel like their emotions are in the driver's seat and they're like in the trunk. And that's a really stressful way to live. But doing simple things, I mean, sounds too good to be true, but even the act of noticing what you're feeling, I'm feeling anxious at a 5, is a really powerful way to get the logical part of your brain on board and start to regulate emotions. So simply labeling your emotions kind of separates you from them. And there are a lot of other very simple practices that, even if you feel like you aren't great at pinpointing your emotions or labeling your emotions, that are kind of good windows. Like if people are curious, even looking up an emotion wheel, there are wheels that help you kind of find the right words to express how you're feeling. Are you feeling hopeful? Are you feeling delighted. It's also important to, notice positive emotions and be able to label those and upregulate those, but being able to put words on our emotions. And I think it's also very important to notice like what is contributing to our emotions unfolding, because if we do something as simple as just writing down what was the event, what are your thoughts, what are the changes in your body that you notice, what are your action urges, and what are some of the consequences, you feel a lot more empowered rather than feeling like emotions just happen to you. You actually can see that you actually co-create. We all co-create our emotions, and we can have a lot more agency if we could even just take a second to observe what exactly happened, and then how are we responding to what happened, and then what are the outcomes of that. And by taking a moment to do that, we can kind of see, like maybe my interpretations are kind of setting me up for a lot of feeling dysregulated, or feeling like my emotion went from like a 3 of anger to like a 10 of anger, thinking that it was on purpose rather than an innocent mistake. And so, yeah, emotion regulation is a superpower that we all need. In this era of AI, one of the things we all still need is to be able to manage our emotions. And I think it's the ultimate superpower.
So one thing that I hear within your approach is that there's a baseline of a kind of mindfulness or emotional intelligence. You could say that we know what we feel, and we know what we feel as we're feeling it. So first I have a question. Do you think that there's a repetitive pattern, like thoughts leading to emotions, or is it just kind of mutually reinforcing? We can start anywhere and it just kind of loops back and forth.
I love that. I think it can loop back and forth, and it depends on the person. I think there's so much variability. It could be a situation leads to certain thoughts. It could be thoughts lead to certain feelings. It could be feelings, physical sensations lead to certain thoughts. But I notice that thoughts are certainly, this is something that a lot of experts find, that the thoughts kind of are the place that you want to focus, because it's hard if your interpretation is really catastrophic to be able to relax your body. If you're thinking the world is ending, it's going to be really
this
hard.
This is the end. That's just what I was thinking.
You're not going to be able to relax your body. So I think even just taking a moment to ask yourself, and I love just taking a moment to think, what is going through my mind, also you could do that with your body. A stress researcher that I interviewed, George Slavich at UCLA for my book, I asked him what his favorite stress reduction practices were when I interviewed him. And he said, just checking in with his body, like he noticed that a lot of the time he didn't even realize that his shoulders were like touching his ears throughout the day when he was sitting at his computer. And so I think just taking a moment to notice like what is happening in my mind and body are some really powerful inroads.
So if you were going to make a recommendation for someone who's just starting their journey to exploring their inner life, would it be like pay attention to the mind or the body, like just in a flash in this moment?
Yeah, I love a simple anchoring technique. We could do this even together right now. Of just taking a moment to feel your feet supported by the earth. If you're sitting in a chair. And then doing a quick 3-point check. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What do I feel like doing right now? And so just this quick 3-point check allows you to start to build the foundation of emotion regulation, because we are kind of checking in with our mind, our body, our actions, and those are some of the key players in terms of the recipe for how emotions kind of build.
Great. Let's take a moment and talk about overthinking and anxiety. So, you talk about the physiological effects that overthinking can have. And can you speak to what overthinking is and those physiological effects?
Yeah, so one of the downsides to being human, it's an upside and a downside, is the ability to think. And one of the things that turns stress into chronic stress is this ability we have to just replay and anticipate and then experience. And I love the way, Sharon, I always am telling this story, so I feel like I should let you tell this story because it's your story of the man in the blister. I don't know if you want to tell it or you want me to.
No, you tell us.
Okay.
I want to hear it.
Okay. Oftentimes when I'm asked about overthinking, I use Sharon's beautiful story about, you told me that, and please correct me if I'm telling any part of this inaccurately, but a man was hiking in Nepal and he had a blister, and he was complaining to his guide that he experiences the pain of the blister, and then he replays it between steps, and then he anticipates it before the next step. And so we have this ability to experience things once or threefold. And for a lot of us, it's like once or 100-fold. And this is one of the things that we know in terms of stress research, that if you ask someone about something upsetting to them that happened, even if it happened 10 years ago, or the person that did it to you died, you still, in re-explaining it, you feel the same physiological impacts as when it happened. And so understanding that thinking really can undermine, like all things, like anxiety, like stress, like there's a certain amount that's helpful, but then there's a certain amount that becomes debilitating and counterproductive and painful. And so noticing, it's almost ironic. It's people need sleep to cope. We really need to have sleep to manage our emotions. There's a huge relationship between good quality sleep and physical health and the ability to regulate emotions and problem solve. But then it's easy to imagine tossing and turning about something that's stressful. And so we need to kind of balance being able to put things down and let go with actually being able to sort things out.
You told the story very well. Thank you. So curious, is part of what happens when we do tune into that physiological consequence of something like overthinking, that we are more almost kind of naturally inclined to let it go, to relinquish, to not cling to it? Because some of our problem seems to be that we're just kind of swimming in the pain all of the time and we don't even feel it anymore.
Yeah, exactly. We need to learn to let go, and maybe our bodies can be an ally, and entering the present, or our breath is such a powerful ally. I mean, we have thousands and thousands of thoughts, but we also have thousands of breaths. And if we can kind of drop into some way to enter this moment, and a lot of people will say, I've done this for decades, I'm not going to be able to change this habit, but this is certainly something that you can't change.
So you have a system in your book that's a guide to breaking up with overthinking. And could you share that?
Yeah, so I don't want to oversimplify, and different things work for different people. And for a lot of people, this does take practice. But and I get into a lot more detail in stress resets, but a few ways that we can start to improve our relationship with our thoughts is even looking at our metacognitions, or what are our beliefs about our thoughts. Because a lot of people, especially I find people that are intelligent and thoughtful and caring, find that they maybe have some sort of belief, some implicit belief that they might not be super aware of at the get-go, that somehow thinking about something is the responsible and conscientious thing to do. If there's a problem that hasn't been resolved, it's good to keep top of mind, because maybe you'll come up with some sort of epiphany or have some sort of insight. And so really looking at your beliefs, because if you have positive beliefs about overthinking, that's going to keep you in these habitual loops of overthinking. And so really realizing, actually, overthinking does not lead to a lot of insight. It leads to depression and anxiety and insomnia, and all of those things can get in the way of creative thought. So I think first and foremost, looking at our beliefs about our thinking patterns. And then I think it's really helpful to set a reasonable goal. If you feel like you're walking around with like the equivalent of a news ticker that's running, or a program running on your computer that's sapping like your energy or slowing you down, it's helpful to have a realistic goal of like, I know that I tend to start to spiral after work from like 7 to 8:30, or right before bed from 9 to 10:30, to actually like work on a specific time frame that you're going to really practice being more present and knowing some of the things that typically lead to some of your overthinking, whether that's reading a certain thing in the news, or social interaction that didn't go the way you wanted it. And then coming up with some sort of plan. If I start to spiral, then I will, I love that I'm saying this to you, practice loving kindness meditation, Or if I start to spiral, then I'll read a novel for pleasure and having like a specific time frame that you're going to work on this, a specific plan of action. And I also love, there's so many different tools, but a technique that I learned from an expert in rumination-focused cognitive therapy. His name is Ed Watkins. He's at the University of Exeter. Dr. Ed Watkins likes to teach people to go from why kinds of thoughts, like why me? Why is this happening? Why is it easier for everyone else? To how thoughts, like how can I move forward? And so one is kind of like this circular dead end, and another is empowering plan forward, or a way to actually lead to problem solving. And so that kind of brings us to another related tip of, problem solving what you can control. A lot of times we're thinking and we're not doing, and sometimes the doing would be a lot more rewarding and efficient than the overthinking.
Well, since we're talking about tools, or the phrase you use is resets, you've outlined several in your book, and there are lots to choose from. But I want to maybe go through a list and then go back and go into some more of them in depth, including some of the science behind them, okay?
Please.
So here are some resets. Ground yourself. Acknowledge your state of mind. Sing your thoughts. Radical acceptance. Sit with uncertainty. Build a hope kit. Box breathing. Loving kindness. Do good deeds. Examine assumptions. Surf your urges. Plot your joy. Schedule time to worry. So, of course, my favorite is loving kindness, but I'd like to have you select some of these, and we'll go into them in more detail.
Sure. I'm happy to go through all of them briefly.
Okay.
So grounding yourself, we briefly covered. That's anchoring, just taking a moment to slow down. If we're going 100 miles an hour, it's going to be really hard to feel like we have any ability to brake or to see clearly. But if we can just, again, take a moment, have some sort of practice, whether it's your feet feeling supported by the earth, or finding your breath and then checking in with yourself. What am I thinking, feeling, doing? You have 3 points to really transform, getting your mind more present, changing your body, and not making things worse. A lot of times in moments that we're overwhelmed, we act in ways that are like high interest credit cards. We just do things that don't work long term. And so just seeing what's happening before it's unfolded in a way that we don't necessarily want it to unfold. Then again, since different things work for different people, I'll talk briefly about some of these other ones. Acknowledging your state of mind is the way I describe a technique in dialectical behavior therapy, which is an approach to help people with intense emotions and who are facing very difficult situations. A lot of times we take all of our thoughts really seriously, or we respond to like thoughts as though they're true, but we all metaphorically and somewhat literally have 3 different states of mind. We have a mind where we have times when we're in emotion mind. We have times when we're in reasonable mind. And we also have times when we're kind of at the sweet spot where our head and heart are combined, and we're in what's called in DBT is wise mind. And so if there's certain times it's great to be in emotion mind, or kind of governed by emotions. If you're at an amusement park, or you're watching a movie or a play, it's great to be in emotion mind, to just be captivated and not think like that doesn't look very realistic, or that would never happen in real life. Like there are times we want to be led by emotions, but we don't want to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. If I need to do my taxes, I don't want to be in a place where I'm governed by emotions, or if it's the middle of the night and I'm thinking in a panic-ridden way, I need to realize like I'm simply in emotion mind. We can kind of, instead of getting into the weeds of like the content of each individual thought, more globally appreciating I'm simply in emotion mind, and this is not a situation that's conducive to emotion mind, is an incredibly liberating way out of emotion mind. Just noticing, okay, before these things happen. If there's turbulence on a plane, if I'm about to give a big speech, if my kid is not going to sleep and it's late in the evening, or if there's a certain topic in the news that leads me to feel like, we're facing some sort of the end of the world, realizing I'm in emotion mind is such a gift. And of course, there's times that we should be in emotion mind, but recognizing when it's not the right time. And in addition to noticing when you're in emotion mind, being able to tap into like wise mind, breathing in wise, breathing out mind is like a way to kind of feel like you're getting both your head and heart on board. It's also helpful to realize if you're in a reasonable mind, and that's not ideal for the situation. If you're maybe just focusing on the facts and not how something will feel, that's also not necessarily great. If someone's just pursuing a job because it's prestigious or it pays well and it doesn't feel quite right, I think to just notice maybe that's an opportunity to reflect on what would be kind of fulfilling both emotionally and reasonably, and that would allow you to be more in a place of wisdom. A similar technique to kind of gain some perspective. The next thing, again, because a lot of us are treating our thoughts like they're very important pieces of information that we need to like debate or respond to. But if you know that you have a thought that's just silly, not helpful, recurrent, counterproductive, and just kind of maybe mean, a lot of us get lost in taking our thoughts so seriously. But if we could instead play with them, seems a little silly, but it's technically known as cognitive diffusion. If you treat your thoughts as just like mental events, it's a lot easier to get unstuck from them. This is another way out of ruminating. So if we could simply see like that thought that you're a loser is actually like not something you need to convince yourself of or something you need to try to fix by, buying things to feel less like a loser. But if you sing I'm a loser to an upbeat tune, like, do you believe in magic? It automatically loses its bite. It becomes more of a personal joke or an opportunity for self-compassion. Like, it's hard to be human. That's really transforms how sticky that thought feels in your life and how much it affects your behavior. And so if there's a recurrent thought, I wouldn't use this for thoughts that are useful or inspiring action. But if there's a thought that just derails you from the things that matter to you, to be able to play with those thoughts. I think some of them, like I'm not good enough or I'm an imposter. I think if people want to take a moment and just identify one thought that just has no upsides and only downsides that they want to move into kind of more of a playful relationship with, rather than feeling like they have this personal inner bully that's bothering them and bogging them down.
So is that the reason to sing your thoughts?
Yeah. And I think this is almost like a variation of something that you've talked about, which is like noticing your inner Lucy. Mm-hmm. This is almost a different way of accomplishing some of the same thing. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about noticing your inner Lucy.
It's just a suggestion we make sometimes if you have a persistent kind of nagging negative inner critic, give it a name, give it a wardrobe, give it a persona, because then you can, in effect, watch and change the way you relate to it, and it could become something actually kind of playful. So my inner critic, as many of you have heard me say, is named Lucy, after the character in the Peanuts comic strip.
Exactly. And the singing accomplishes kind of the same thing. And so again, different people have different ways of practicing mindfulness of thoughts, or ways to kind of get above the mind and see the content of the mind for what it is. And a fun way that I like is the singing. And then next on the list that you shared is radical acceptance. And so radical acceptance is hard and also life-changing, but radical acceptance is a way of noticing pain, and it's allowing pain to just be pain. So pain is just pain. But knowing that if you take pain and don't accept it, you create suffering. And so if there's something that you can't, that's bothering you, noticing if you're thinking it shouldn't be this way and clenching your muscles and scowling, noticing that all of those things, the judgments and the facial kind of almost rebelling against reality with your face, and then acting in ways that don't serve you, those things all lead to to more pain. You could give yourself a tension headache. You could feel hopeless. But if we can radically just accept what is just as it is in this very moment through being, allowing what is and relaxing your face and doing what you would do if you did accept. And that's a really meaningful way to start to move towards freedom. And of course, this isn't to be confused with doing nothing or accepting conditions that feel unacceptable, but this allows you to actually make the changes that you want to make. Because if you're giving yourself a migraine or feeling overcome with despair, you're not in a great position to take actions. And so I even just love this is a big concept, but a very small inroad is even just watching your facial expression. If you're on a long line or in traffic or facing all sorts of physical challenges, if you could relax your facial expression, even in this moment, if you notice if there's any tension in your brow, ever so slightly raising the upper corners of your lips into what's called a half smile, like a Buddhist kind of expression or Mona Lisa smile. We could all do this together. If you raise the corners of your lips, you automatically release tension in your brow, and it helps kind of with this facial feedback loop of communicating to your face that it's okay. It kind of quiets the mind. And so that's one thing that I often I also think all of these things are synergistic and work well together, because radical acceptance also helps ease up some overthinking and ruminating. The next thing I think you said was sit with uncertainty. So with the sit with uncertainty, a lot of us feel, especially in this day and age with so many ways to try to find certainty, whether with Google Maps or with checking the weather compulsively, or even checking where people are located that you care about, or looking things up and having AI answer all sorts of complicated questions. A lot of us feel like the more that we search for answers, the more we'll feel at ease. But actually, experts in anxiety are pretty clear that we can't have answers to everything. We can't know things for sure. And the quest for looking for answers to things we'll never know is exhausting and not in line with kind of being accepting and allowing things to unfold. And so I think noticing, it's so easy. I was doing this a lot, myself during certain times this year with the fires or the election, of trying to know exactly how things are going to play out. But I think if we just notice and practice some compassion for ourselves, if it's hard to not know, but the quest for knowing is exhausting and draining and honestly kind of futile. We'll never know. And I know it's so tempting if you are in a social situation to try to ask people what they thought, but it's going to be so much more empowering and liberating to try to offer some self-validation of you can get through this, rather than needing to know things that we'll never possibly know. And this is hard, but I think if you just take a moment to think about what are some of the ways you try to find certainty that backfire, and maybe come up with one small way to allow uncertainty to exist when it's useful. I'm not saying don't, use technology to help you plan whether or not you need to use an umbrella. But if you're looking up how likely is it this thing is going to happen, and there's no way to possibly know, the constant checking is really not accepting the reality that things need to unfold, and we can't be, privy to seeing what's going to happen and know entirely how it will unfold. But one thing that we can know is, I like the next tip is called building a hope kit. Is what are the things that do fill us with hope? I mean, instead of trying to look all around us for things we'll never know, we can try to find a sense of peace within us by putting together a collection of things. If you are feeling really overwhelmed by not knowing things, I also want to give you some comfort of being able to find peace in the things that you do know. And it seems simple, but putting together a collection, whether it's photos, songs, maybe scents, maybe, some encouraging words or inspiring quotes that people have shared with you, or words people have said to you, or voice memos. If you put together a collection of things, that have given you a sense of hope. Even for people that are facing really difficult medical conditions or feeling really extremely depressed, so much so that they're struggling with thoughts of suicide, having a hope kit, a collection that broadens your perspective and reminds you of more than just what you're facing this moment, is actually a very significant way to improve hope. And so one of the things that always inspires me is this fact that there's things right within our reach that can significantly make a difference in just a matter of minutes. And, just in my own life, I have like a picture of my grandparents. I'm looking at it right now, holding me. I must have been like 4. There's like a piñata in the picture of like, sometimes if I'm having a hard day, just looking at this picture, I'm like, it's okay. Like there's more than what's, this upsetting email. There's more to this moment. Or having a nice card that someone wrote me is just a good way, because to not be so laser focused on the problem, but being able to see kind of the bigger picture and remembering better times and harder moments. Sharon, I'm so curious. Do you have any things that are in your hope kit? Or
I don't know that I have a specific hope kit. I have my, when you open up my computer, the photo is of my teacher, Deepa Ma, holding my head, blessing me. I'm about 19 years old.
Wow.
And it's such a beautiful, beautiful image that I feel like just turning to it, more often. It's really a beautiful remembrance of that kind of blessing and that kind of love, which was so important in my life. But I have a question, especially came up in my mind in this last one. I wonder if you've heard from adolescents, younger people, about some of these tools, some of these resets, either through your private practice or people who've read the book, because there was somebody actually who came to my mind, a 13-year-old, and as you were talking about building a hope kit, I thought that would probably be a beautiful exercise for her.
I recently participated in an event. It was like a holiday party with Just Keep Living Foundation, which is an organization that Matthew McConaughey spearheads for after-school programming for youth in lower income neighborhoods or that are affected by financial limitations. And we had like this lovely event, and we talked about building a hope kit, especially for college seniors that are, I know not 13 exactly, but for college seniors, when you feel like, oh my gosh, where I'm going to go to college is going to dictate the rest of my life, and I need to know now where I'm going. And it's really this mix of feeling like so much is at stake, remembering there's so much more, and you will thrive wherever you go. And maybe there'll be challenges and upsides at different places, but remembering so much more. And so, yeah, I think this is helpful for people of all ages, from adolescents to older adults to so many people. I'm even thinking of, one thing that you said to me many years ago is that something that is like part of my portable walking hope kit. I remember, I think when I wrote my second book, you said something to me when I was worried about how will this book reach people, and will it do well enough, and will it get the response I hope it has on readers. You said, even if this touches one person, that's significant. And so I think hope kit can be like, a reframe. It could be something that just you remember in those moments where you easily get kind of overcome with limiting thoughts or perspective. Yeah, I think a hope kit is a wonderful thing for everyone to work on. And I know it sounds kind of simple, but there is research on this virtual hope. It's called a virtual hope kit that significantly actually reduces suicidal thoughts. And there's other research on people with terminal cancer and it improving hope in that population. And so I think these small things can go a long way, even if we think our situation is really dire. And the hope kit can also include reminders to take certain actions, to practice a certain exercise that works for you, or to reach out to a specific person, or to remember a specific thing someone told you, or encouraging word. The next thing that you had asked about was box breathing. Mm-hmm. And so box breathing is a technique that Navy SEALs use. And so this helps people when they're in like this intense fight or flight mode. And we can all do this again together. But if you breathe in through your nose for 4, you're counting to 4 and breathing through your nose. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath for 4 without putting too much tension on your mouth or nose. Then exhaling for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Holding your breath for 4. And then repeating this a few times. You could work on this for a few rounds. This really slows our breathing rate down. And there's something about slowing down your breathing that is helpful for your nervous system. It helps you improve your heart rate. It lowers blood pressure, even helps with digestion. I think that there's something about just the nature of the 4 in, holding for 4 seconds, out for 4, holding for 4, that's very mentally absorbing. And so it's hard to imagine thinking about other things. I know some people struggle, and I certainly did do at times also, of letting your mind wandering too much when you're trying to focus on the breath. But sometimes these more count-based or active practices can kind of be helpful if you want to start with this and then moving to a different, less structured practice. I think this is a nice inroad. And then I know you mentioned loving kindness meditation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want me to share about that, or do you want to?
Yeah, of course.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I felt this way last time. It's a very strange situation to teach the person that taught you.
And actually, I don't know if you have any science about loving kindness meditation. I always like to hear that.
Yeah, no. So I think, I'm always struck by the science that for people who are self-critical, if you tend to be self-critical, if you made a mistake and you beat yourself up for it, loving kindness, practicing saying statements like, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be safe, may I live with ease, both for yourself and for the people around you, starting with someone that you love, yourself, someone that you care about that's having a hard time, person you see but don't know well, a somewhat difficult person. It's so helpful, I think, in the aftermath of something difficult to be able to do something that allows you to kind of tap into being nice to yourself. And so I think for when people tell me that they want to work on their self-confidence, I get excited to tell them that actually loving kindness might be the thing that they're looking for, because we really need to know how to like ourselves regardless of how well we do on this performance review, or how much this person wants to go on a third date with us. So the science is that people who practice this are more likely to increase positive emotions and feel more connected to themselves and others. And I think it's such a lovely way for people who feel maybe anxious before an event or a presentation or party where they don't know people, to actually set themselves up for more joy ahead, during, and afterwards. Related to loving kindness, I know you had asked about doing good deeds, and there's something many people, I think, struggle because they feel like they don't have agency or they don't have control. But we know that in studies where older adults are doing things to be supportive, like helping with errands, like picking up a child after school or meal prep, or looking in on a neighbor, or caring for a loved one, or even taking care of a plant, doing things for others increases longevity. It helps us shift our perspective. It makes us feel like there's more. We do have some sort of say, even if we feel powerless. And a lot of people, I think, worry that they feel so depleted that they don't have a lot of space. But small things, giving someone a compliment, smiling at someone, donating to a cause that you see someone crowdfunding for, small things count. And there's even just sending someone an email or a card. I was thinking of you. It's been a while. A lot of times we only reach out to people maybe when we need a favor or we have a question, but to a small thing, I think, to track kind of small things you can do is significantly improves mood and helps us remember kind of, again, a lot of these are about perspective, that things are still hard, but we're so lucky in so many ways. And there's so much we can offer, even if we feel frustrated by things we can't control. Sharon, anything you want to add on that one? I know this is something that you teach a lot.
I'm going to, as we wrap up, in some minutes from now, there's a scenario I want to present to you, which is going to highlight this idea of doing good deeds, I think. Let's see.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, perfect. And then examining assumptions, again, a lot of what I teach and a lot of what I've learned about managing stress and emotions is about noticing thoughts. And I think a lot of times we have certain assumptions about this person's being a jerk, or I can't count on anyone. And I think really looking at our assumptions and appreciating the role of context of, it's easy to think, I live in LA, like you were saying, the person that does the tickets, if you didn't feed your parking meter, is a jerk. But another way to see that is that person is just doing their job, and it's probably not the most pleasant or rewarding job, but to really see. And so if you assume, this person didn't text me back, or this person doesn't remember to celebrate my milestones and I celebrate theirs, rather than personalizing it, I think it's really helpful in these difficult times to notice our assumptions and to kind of see maybe there's a more generous way to perceive someone's behavior. And that's a much more helpful way for us to both feel better about other people and to feel less badly in our own lives. I love kind of just trying to think about the most generous interpretation. And I have so many examples I could think of, but even, I remember once in my office, a client said to me, like, you seem really annoyed with me. And I was so grateful that he said that. I was like, oh my goodness, I seemed annoyed with you. What am I doing that makes you feel like I'm annoyed with you? And he said, there's just something about how you look today that seems annoyed. And I was so happy that he had the courage to say that, because at the time I was actually pregnant and I was feeling quite nauseous. And I had no idea, this was a number of years ago, and I had no idea that my nausea was being broadcast across my face. And it was such a gift, because then I could clarify, oh my goodness, actually I'm pregnant, and you're probably one of the first people to know because I'm only about 8 weeks, but I am not annoyed with you at all. I'm actually very happy that you're here and very sorry for any communication that can conveyed otherwise. I'm just not feeling 100%. But again, I love that you're here and I'm well enough to pay full attention to you. And if my face isn't doing what I think it's doing, I will modulate that. But yeah, I think a lot of times we walk around with these strange conclusions that aren't based in what's actually happening. Mm-hmm. And what a gift to even just ask someone about what their assumptions are, because that person could have easily walked away and quit and let that contribute to them feeling less than. And that would have been really heartbreaking for both of us.
Well, I'm thinking, it's a very particular relationship that you have with a client. But I was sitting there thinking, what if you really were annoyed with them?
But
and they had the courage to bring it up. Because it's not always that particular relationship. It's a friend, or a colleague. And we have the courage to say, I need to examine this assumption I'm making that I'm really annoying you. And they turn to us and say, you're right. You are. I guess there's a kind of relief in feeling, oh yeah, my intuition is doing well. But I would also open the door to communication, I suppose, to say, let's talk about that. What is it that you find annoying? And, my intention is not to do that, but my intention is to have us work well together, or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think any close relationship is going to have moments where we're either going to get closer or we're going to be disconnected. And I think if it's clear that the intention is making things better and closeness, I think it's a gift. Someone just told me, a client said to me, this is so general that I would never be revealing of who this person is, but that's someone she went on a date with told her afterwards that she had terrible breath. If someone tells you nicely, the way he said it was terrible, but if someone says to you nicely, like, hey, I care about you and I want to get to know you. And I notice that, I have this very hypersensitive smell sense. And I notice that sometimes after we eat meals, I can smell some of your food or something, and I wanted to tell you because I care about you. That's a very difficult, brave thing to say that you need to say with a lot of generosity and loveliness, but that's doing a good deed. I mean, we need to, or if it's someone's doing something that's not very thoughtful, letting someone know in a very kind way is such a gift. I think if your intention is good and your delivery is loving and empathic, it's so helpful to let others know or to be curious.
And I guess since we're focusing on anxiety, maybe it's better to get the bad news than to be lost in conjecture.
Yeah, I guess even with anxiety, I guess there's so many assumptions of it's going to last forever, or it's going to get worse, or if I don't know, it'll be bad. I need to be prepared. But I think even assumptions around that of emotions come in waves, and I can deal with these things, and looking at some of our assumptions around our ability to cope.
Okay, so we have 3 more resets to go.
Yes. So surf your urges is just this idea that a lot of us have this assumption, speaking of assumptions, that if you don't act on an urge, if you have something you want to do that's not necessarily helpful, if it's like staying up late or eating a snack that's not aligned with your health goals, or saying something rude to someone not in a constructive way, if you step back and you look at that urge, many of us think that if we don't act on it, it's just going to drive us crazy. We're not going to be able to think about anything else. But actually, like emotions, urges come in waves. And if we step back, we see that an urge might be intense, but if we don't judge it, and if we can be present with something else, it will subside. And it's a really liberating thing to realize that you don't have to be attached or governed by your impulses that aren't going to ultimately serve you. And just having this understanding that like you could literally teach someone that urges come and go. And even someone that struggles with like cigarette smoking could learn urge surfing and then be less likely to. A brief urge surfing training takes maybe 7 minutes. People could then be faced with a cigarette and not act on the desire to smoke because they've learned to accept urges rather than kind of suffer with them. So in conjunction with learning to surf our urges, we also need to do things that feel good. And I think these days we're so busy and we're expected to be responsive, and there's so much we need to attend to and troubleshoot. It's important to realize it's also really important to put some time and thought into planning things for joy. A lot of times people have this idea that when things get more quiet, or when I finally have more time, then I'll get coffee with a friend, or then I'll go to a yoga class. But we need to plan positive events, because positive emotions actually reduce negative emotions. The more we can enjoy positives, the more we create some sort of buffer, and we're less negatively impacted by stressors. And so I love helping people, just maybe it's, even doing like one thing that you were looking forward to doing that you've postponed doing this week, and maybe really trying to reframe something that you're already doing so it aligns with more joy. If you're having lunch with a friend and framing that as like, another event on my calendar, to instead really lean into like, wow, I get to go to a restaurant that I haven't been to, and I get to talk to someone face to face when most of my day is on Zoom. And so there's a lot of ways to plan joy, whether it's improving the way we view our schedule, or also finally doing the things that we've been putting off that we actually would really benefit from making time for. And then lastly, this is kind of opposite, is if you feel like it's hard to actually enjoy much because you're always worrying, if you make a schedule and give yourself like a short block to worry in, if you say, wow, like worry is something that's just eating me throughout the day and sapping my focus in an ongoing way, what if you take like a 15-minute window, and that's your time that you're going to think about the things that stress you out? It can go from kind of this all-day habit. It can move from like an all-day habit to like a 15, 20-minute appointment where it doesn't feel like it's draining you all the time, but you have a concentrated way to sit with it, and maybe the more focused attention where it's not kind of something you're multitasking with, but it's something that you're facing with your full attention, maybe that leads to more problem solving, and maybe that leads to actually finding out some solutions in a way that we can't when we're just kind of walking and thinking at the same time as we are talking to someone and trying to work. And when we're not giving worry our full attention, it's hard to actually come to resolutions.
It's fantastic. And it's an extraordinary set of skills or tools that could be available to us. It's really great hearing this. And I wish we had more time to discuss each one, but that's also what the book is for. And I would really encourage everyone to get a copy of Stress Resets. And it's actually fully called Stress Resets, How to Soothe Your Body and Mind in Minutes. And there's also a card deck available by the same name, because I think just having a sense of a path, so that we don't just get this sense of, I'm going to suffer endlessly from this condition, which is really dragging me down, is it's such an important element just to have that sense of a path. And it's not pass fail. We notice schedule time to worry is on this list. We may try different things. Some things may be more effective at certain times and not other times, but there's something, it is like a tremendous refuge, I find, to have a sense of a path, and we can pursue it, in our own ways and in our own time. So I want to close with one hypothetical scenario, and it especially came to my mind when you were talking about doing good deeds. So let's say that you're worried about climate change and the natural disasters that seem to be related to climate change. You find yourself increasingly anxious, especially at night when trying to sleep. You end up scrolling on your phone in an effort to stay informed, but end up not being able to sleep at all. So, of course, there are many of the tools that you mentioned that might be relevant, but especially in the light of doing good deeds, what would you say to such a person?
There's so many different things that could be helpful in this situation. Honestly, the first thing that came to mind when you said that was, I think we need to just make life a little bit easier for ourselves. And there are time lock containers that you can get on Amazon for people that feel like in the middle of the night, their willpower is low. They feel really compelled to be scrolling on their phone, and they use their phone as their alarm clock. I love the idea of even having like a time lock container where you make it a little easier. You don't have to fight the urge you don't have to surf the urge, but you certainly don't have to fight the urge to be checking all night. But to have like a small container, I just bought one myself, where you can stow your phone if you know that repeatedly in the night you're kind of tossing and turning and clutching your phone in a way that's just keeping you up. So I think that's one prong of the maybe 3-prong approach that I'll share. I think thinking about one thing that you can do that would feel constructive when it comes to climate change and natural disasters, if you want to do something within reach that feels meaningful to you, if it's eat more of a vegetarian diet a few days a week, or if it's ordering less online and leading to less returns. I know these are smaller things, but these small things could lead to a big change. Or if there's causes that you want to donate to, if you're worried about climate change, what is something productive that you can do? And then I also really like, especially late at night, doing slow breathing, like breathing in for 5 seconds, out for 5 seconds, because us not sleeping is not going to set us up to solve the problems that we need to solve in our lives and in the world at large. And so having ways to just make it a little easier for us to not go down patterns that are going to keep us up, and then finding a way to actually make a change, and then learning to kind of find some tranquility within us, even if things are shaky around us, I think is a really helpful way to feel hope even in times of despair.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I think this will be a wonderful conversation as part of this series, and it'll be helpful to many, many people out there. So remember, Jenny's latest book is called Stress Resets: How to Soothe Your Body and Mind in Minutes. And there's also a card deck available by the same name.
Thank you. It was such an honor to talk to you, Sharon, as always.
Hey folks, thanks so much for listening. If you've made it all the way here, you've reached the end of the podcast. So if you'd like to learn more about Dr. Jenny, you can visit her website at drjennytaitz.com. That's drjennytaitz.com. And there are all kinds of different resources, including quizzes and downloads and different services that she offers. If you'd like to check out the inaugural episode of this particular podcast series, you can rewind one episode and head back to Dr. Judd Brewer, who launched our series a couple weeks ago in episode 260. We'll be running this series for many months ahead, so stay tuned for more on this subject. And before we go, if you want to check out any of Sharon's other resources, online courses, guided meditations, or her numerous books, you can visit SharonSalzberg.com. This has been the Metta Hour podcast, brought to you by the Be Here Now Network. May you be safe. May you be happy, may you be healthy, and may you live with ease.